For 2,000 years, we have misunderstood one of the most powerful spiritual laws ever spoken. When Jesus said, "Give, and it shall be given unto you," he was not talking about charity. He was not talking about money. He was revealing a secret about consciousness that changes everything you think you know about receiving. Most people treat this teaching like a spiritual transaction. They give expecting to receive. They donate hoping for blessings. They serve while secretly counting what comes back. But this mercantile approach to spirituality blocks the very flow Jesus was describing. It turns divine law into human bargaining. Joel Goldsmith spent decades discovering what Jesus actually meant. He found that giving in the spiritual sense has nothing to do with physical objects or actions. It is about the giving of your consciousness, the radiation of your awareness, the sharing of your inner realization of truth. This is the secret that transforms everything. When you truly understand this principle as Goldsmith taught it, you stop trying to get anything from the universe. You stop manipulating spiritual laws for personal gain. You begin to give from the infinite source within you, and that is when the real miracles begin to unfold in your life. The traditional interpretation has created generations of spiritual seekers who give to get. They perform acts of kindness while watching for returns. They share resources while mentally calculating cosmic interest rates. This is not the teaching Jesus revealed. This is human nature dressed in spiritual language. Goldsmith discovered that biblical giving means something radically different. It means giving your attention to truth rather than appearances. It means giving your faith to the invisible rather than the visible. It means giving recognition to the spiritual reality behind all material forms. When Jesus spoke of giving, he was teaching about consciousness, not currency. He was revealing that what you acknowledge, recognize, and give your awareness to becomes your experience. If you give your consciousness to lack, you experience lack. If you give your consciousness to divine abundance, abundance flows. This understanding changes the entire spiritual journey. You are not trying to earn blessings through good behavior. You are not attempting to manipulate God through generous actions. You are learning to give your inner attention to the truth of infinite supply already present in consciousness. Consider how this works in practical terms. A woman named Catherine struggled financially for years despite tithing faithfully and volunteering constantly. She gave and gave, always expecting her breakthrough. She felt frustrated, even betrayed by the teaching. Where was her return? Then she encountered Goldsmith's writings on consciousness. She realized she had been giving things while withholding her consciousness. Even while donating money, her mind was fixed on her bills, her debts, her lack. She was giving materially, but taking mentally, constantly drawing from the appearance of limitation. Catherine began a new practice. Instead of forcing herself to give money she felt she lacked, she started giving her attention to the truth of infinite divine supply. She would sit quietly and acknowledge the presence of abundance in consciousness itself, not in her bank account. She gave recognition to this invisible reality. Within 3 months, unexpected opportunities appeared, not because she manipulated a cosmic vending machine, but because her consciousness had shifted from taking to giving. She was no longer trying to extract from the universe. She was radiating awareness of what already existed spiritually, and material circumstances reflected this inner change. The secret Joel Goldsmith uncovered goes even deeper. Giving in the spiritual sense means releasing your consciousness from the belief in limited supply altogether. It means giving up the mental struggle to get, achieve, earn, or deserve. You stop taking thoughts from the world and start giving truth from within. This is why Jesus connected giving with receiving in the same breath. It is not cause and effect across time. It is the same movement of consciousness. The moment you give recognition to spiritual truth, you receive the experience of that truth. They are simultaneous because they are one activity. Most people never experience this because they separate the giving from the receiving. They give today hoping to receive tomorrow. They give here expecting to receive there. But consciousness does not work that way. What you give your awareness to in this moment is what you receive as experience in this moment. When Goldsmith taught students to give spiritually, he meant give your consciousness to God, to truth, to the invisible reality of perfection. Stop taking your thoughts from appearances. Stop extracting your beliefs from circumstances. Begin to give from the infinite well within, and watch how receiving happens not as a future reward, but as a present reality. A man named Matteo had tried every manifestation technique for years. He visualized, affirmed, and gave generously to charities. Still, his business struggled. He felt exhausted by the constant mental effort to create results. Everything felt like taking, even his spiritual practices. Then Matteo read Goldsmith's teaching about giving consciousness rather than things. He realized his entire approach had been about extraction. Even his prayers were attempts to pull blessings from God. His affirmations were efforts to take from the universe. His giving was strategic manipulation. Matteo began a completely different practice. Each morning, instead of visualizing what he wanted to receive, he sat in silence and gave his attention to the presence of infinite intelligence within his own consciousness. He stopped trying to take wisdom and started acknowledging the wisdom already present. He would sit with business challenges, and instead of desperately seeking solutions, he would give recognition to the divine mind that already knew the answer. He stopped taking thoughts of worry and started giving awareness to peace. He stopped extracting plans and started radiating trust. The transformation in Matteo's experience was gradual but undeniable. Within 2 months, solutions began appearing that he had never considered. Opportunities emerged without his usual forceful effort. His business started flowing because his consciousness had shifted from taking to giving. The key was subtle but powerful. Matteo was no longer trying to get anything from the spiritual dimension. He was giving his recognition to what already existed there. He was no longer depleting himself through mental extraction. He was radiating from an inner source. Clients noticed a difference in his presence. He seemed more confident, more peaceful, more genuinely helpful. They were responding not to his sales techniques but to the consciousness he was radiating. He was giving something invisible but completely tangible. This is what Goldsmith meant by give and it shall be given. Matteo was giving his awareness to infinite intelligence, and infinite intelligence was being given back to him as ideas, opportunities, connections. The giving and receiving were one simultaneous movement of consciousness, not separated by time or effort. Another breakthrough story involves a teacher named Maria, who felt completely burned out. She had given everything to her students for 20 years, her time, energy, resources, creativity. Yet she felt empty, resentful, and exhausted. Where was the promised return? Maria discovered Goldsmith's teaching at her lowest point. She realized she had been giving from a human sense of limited personal resources. She gave until she felt depleted because she believed she was giving from herself. This is why the giving felt draining rather than renewing. Goldsmith taught that true spiritual giving flows from consciousness itself, which is infinite and never depleted. Maria learned to stop giving from her limited human sense and start giving from her awareness of divine presence. She would enter her classroom each day not asking how much she had to give, but acknowledging the infinite wisdom and love flowing through her. The change was remarkable. Her work became effortless rather than exhausting. She had more energy at the end of days than at the beginning. Students responded with deeper engagement. Maria was finally experiencing what Jesus taught because she was giving from the right source, from consciousness itself rather than from personal willpower. The teaching transforms when you realize that consciousness is the currency of the spiritual universe. You are always giving your consciousness to something. The question is what? Are you giving it to appearances or to truth? Are you giving it to problems or to presence? Are you giving it to lack or to abundance? Every moment of awareness is an act of giving. When you give your attention to fear, you receive more fear. When you give your consciousness to divine perfection, you receive the experience of perfection. This is the law Jesus taught, and it operates with absolute precision every moment. Goldsmith spent his life helping people understand this principle not as theology, but as practical spiritual science. You are not trying to be good enough to deserve blessings. You are learning to give your consciousness to the blessings that already exist in the invisible realm, and that recognition becomes your visible experience. The old interpretation kept people in spiritual poverty despite generous actions. The true understanding liberates you into the flow of infinite supply because you discover you are not trying to get anything. You are learning to give recognition to everything that already exists in consciousness. If these stories of transformed understanding inspire you, like this video to help others discover what Jesus really taught. Subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment which insight shifted your perspective on giving and receiving. Beyond the basic principle, Goldsmith taught specific practices for giving consciousness rather than things. The first practice is radical simplicity. Throughout your day, notice when you are trying to take something mentally. Notice when you are trying to extract security from circumstances, love from people, or peace from conditions. In those moments, stop the taking. Instead, give your attention to the truth that security, love, and peace exist in consciousness itself, independent of conditions. You are not looking at your bank account for security. You are giving recognition to the divine presence that is security itself. This is the practice of giving. The second practice involves releasing the belief that you must earn or deserve what you need. This belief keeps you in a taking mentality, constantly trying to qualify for blessings. Goldsmith taught that spiritual giving means acknowledging that infinite good already exists in consciousness, available not through earning but through recognition. When you catch yourself trying to deserve love, success, or health, pause and give your awareness instead to the truth that these qualities exist in consciousness right now. You are not working to achieve them. You are giving recognition to their present reality. This shift from taking through effort to giving through awareness changes everything. The third practice is perhaps the most challenging. Goldsmith taught that true giving includes giving up your demands about how good should appear. Most people give consciousness to their desired outcomes, their specific pictures of how life should look. This is actually a sophisticated form of taking. Real spiritual giving means offering your consciousness to divine intelligence without dictating the form. You give recognition to infinite wisdom and then release your attachment to particular appearances. You stop trying to extract your version of good and start radiating openness to how consciousness itself wants to express. A businessman named Robert practiced this with remarkable results. Instead of visualizing specific deals closing, he began each day giving his attention to divine intelligence operating through his business. He acknowledged infinite wisdom without telling it what form that wisdom should take. Within weeks, opportunities emerged that were far better than what he had been trying to force. Partnerships formed that he never would have imagined. Robert learned that when you give consciousness to truth without demands, life organizes itself in ways beyond personal planning. The giving becomes effortless and the receiving becomes miraculous. Another essential practice involves giving consciousness during apparent lack or crisis. This is when most people revert to taking mentality. When problems appear, the automatic response is to grab at solutions, to take thoughts of worry, to extract yourself from discomfort through mental struggling. Goldsmith taught the opposite approach. When challenges appear, that is precisely when to practice giving consciousness to truth. Instead of taking anxious thoughts about the problem, give your attention to the presence of divine wisdom within the situation. Instead of extracting yourself through panic, radiate trust in invisible intelligence. A woman named Jennifer faced a serious health diagnosis. Her first response was typical taking behavior. She desperately searched for solutions, consumed information anxiously, and tried to force healing through willpower. She felt exhausted and more frightened daily. The taking mentality depleted her. Then she remembered Goldsmith's teaching. She began giving her consciousness to the truth of spiritual perfection instead of taking fearful thoughts from medical appearances. Each day she sat quietly acknowledging divine life as the only reality. She gave her awareness to wholeness instead of trying to extract healing from treatments. Her recovery was steady and complete. The final complementary practice is giving consciousness in relationships. Most human interaction operates on taking. People take validation from others, take security from approval, take identity from recognition. Even in giving physically, they are often taking emotionally. This creates exhausting, depleting relationships. Goldsmith taught that spiritual relationship means giving consciousness of the divine presence in the other person. You are not looking at them to take what you need. You are giving recognition to the spiritual reality they embody. You acknowledge the Christ consciousness in them, rather than extracting personal satisfaction from them. When you practice this, relationships transform completely. You stop being drained by people because you are not taking from them. You stop trying to change them because you are giving recognition to their spiritual perfection. They sense this shift and often respond with their own higher consciousness. A mother named Susan struggled with her teenage daughter for years. Every interaction was a battle because Susan was constantly trying to take compliance, respect, and validation from her daughter. Then Susan began giving consciousness of divine wisdom and love present in her daughter, instead of taking desired behavior. Within months, their relationship healed in ways counseling had never achieved. Despite understanding the principle, many people encounter a persistent challenge. They find themselves unconsciously reverting to taking mentality, especially under stress. Old patterns of trying to extract security, love, or success from external sources feel automatic and overwhelming. This is completely normal in the early stages. Goldsmith taught that this struggle reveals the depth of human conditioning. For years, perhaps lifetimes, consciousness has been trained to take rather than give. The mind has learned to grab at circumstances for identity, to extract validation from achievements, to pull security from conditions. These patterns do not dissolve instantly. The solution is not to fight the taking mentality, but to consistently, gently return to giving consciousness. When you notice yourself trying to extract peace from circumstances, pause without self-judgment. Simply redirect your attention to giving recognition to the peace that exists in consciousness itself. This is spiritual practice. A man named Thomas struggled with this for months. He would practice giving consciousness in the morning, then spend his day unconsciously taking thoughts of worry from work situations. He felt discouraged by his inability to maintain the giving consciousness. This discouragement itself was another form of taking. Thomas' breakthrough came when he stopped judging his taking patterns and simply kept returning to giving. He realized that the judgment itself was taking, trying to extract a perfect spiritual state from himself. Instead, he began treating each moment of awareness as a new opportunity to give consciousness to truth. He stopped expecting himself to never slip into taking mentality. Instead, he practiced noticing when it happened and gently redirecting his attention. Over time, the giving consciousness became more natural, more sustained. The key was patience with the process rather than demands for instant transformation. Goldsmith emphasized that spiritual development is gradual. You are retraining consciousness from lifelong habits of taking to a new pattern of giving. This does not happen through force or self-criticism. It happens through consistent, compassionate practice. Each time you redirect from taking to giving, you strengthen the new pattern. Another common challenge involves feeling that giving consciousness seems ineffective when circumstances do not immediately change. People practice giving their attention to divine abundance but still see lack in their bank account. They give consciousness to perfect health but still experience symptoms. This apparent contradiction causes doubt. Goldsmith taught that this challenge reveals a misunderstanding of time and consciousness. When you give your awareness to spiritual truth, you are not causing a future material change. You are recognizing a present spiritual reality. The material reflection of that reality may take time to appear, but the spiritual reality exists now. The mistake is measuring the effectiveness of giving consciousness by immediate material results. This is actually reverting to taking mentality, trying to extract visible proof from invisible practice. True spiritual giving means acknowledging truth regardless of appearances, not because of them or to change them. A woman named Patricia struggled with this for a year. She faithfully gave her consciousness to divine abundance but saw no financial improvement. She felt tempted to abandon the practice as ineffective. Then she realized she was still taking, still trying to use spiritual giving to extract material results. Patricia shifted her approach completely. She continued giving consciousness to infinite supply, but she stopped demanding that her bank balance reflect this immediately. She gave her awareness to truth for its own sake, not as a technique to change appearances. Within 3 months of this genuine shift, her financial situation transformed through unexpected channels. The deepest challenge many face is the fear that giving consciousness without taking anything in return leaves them vulnerable and unprotected. If you stop trying to extract security from circumstances, what protects you? If you stop grabbing at opportunities, will you miss out? This fear keeps people locked in taking mentality. Goldsmith addressed this fear directly. He taught that the taking mentality creates the very vulnerability it fears. When you try to extract your good from external sources, you are dependent on those sources. You are at the mercy of circumstances, people, and conditions. This is the ultimate vulnerability and insecurity. True spiritual giving liberates you from this dependence. When you give your consciousness to the infinite source within, you are no longer vulnerable to external changes. You are drawing from a well that never runs dry. You are radiating from a source that never depletes. This is real security. A businessman named Allen faced this fear during an economic downturn. His instinct was to grab at every opportunity, to take aggressively in a competitive market. But he had been studying Goldsmith and decided to practice giving consciousness instead. He gave his attention to divine intelligence operating through his business rather than trying to extract success from circumstances. If these techniques for overcoming obstacles resonate with your journey, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced Joel Goldsmith teachings, and comment which challenge you are ready to transform through giving consciousness. In advanced practice, giving consciousness becomes your natural state rather than a deliberate technique. You find yourself spontaneously giving attention to truth instead of taking thoughts from appearances. This happens not through effort, but through the gradual retraining of awareness that comes from consistent practice over time. Goldsmith described this as living from consciousness rather than from conditions. Instead of checking circumstances to determine how you feel and what you think, you begin each moment by giving your awareness to the spiritual reality within consciousness. Then you allow circumstances to reflect that inner reality rather than dictating it. A teacher named Elizabeth reached this stage after 2 years of practice. She noticed that her first response to challenges was no longer anxiety or problem-solving. Her natural response became giving her attention to the presence of divine wisdom. This was not forced discipline, but genuine shift in consciousness. When her school faced budget cuts threatening her position, Elizabeth did not panic or scheme. She gave her consciousness to the truth of divine supply and perfect right action. She continued her work with peace and excellence. Within a month, a better position opened at another school with higher pay and more fulfillment. Advanced giving consciousness also transforms how you experience abundance. Instead of seeing prosperity as accumulation of things, you recognize it as the radiation of consciousness. You are not trying to get more. You are giving more awareness to the infinite good already present in the invisible realm. This shift eliminates the tension and struggle around money and resources. You are not striving to extract wealth from the world. You are acknowledging the infinite supply in consciousness and allowing it to take whatever material form serves your spiritual journey. The giving is effortless because you are giving from infinity. A woman named Rachel experienced this transformation in her business. She had built success through aggressive taking, constantly pushing for more clients and more revenue. Then she learned Goldsmith's principle and began giving consciousness to divine abundance instead of taking market share from competitors. Her business did not shrink as she feared. Instead, it flourished in new ways. Clients came through unexpected referrals. Opportunities appeared without her usual hustling. Rachel was working less but receiving more because she had shifted from taking consciousness to giving consciousness. The universe responds to what you radiate, not what you grab at. In relationships, advanced practice means giving consciousness of love without taking anything in return. This sounds idealistic, but it is profoundly practical. When you give recognition to the divine love present in consciousness itself, you stop depleting yourself by trying to extract love from people who may not be capable of giving it. Goldsmith taught that most relationship suffering comes from taking mentality. People try to take validation from partners, take security from family, take identity from friendships. When others fail to provide what is being taken, resentment and pain result. The taking creates the suffering. A man named Christopher transformed his marriage through this understanding. He had spent years trying to take appreciation and affirmation from his wife. He felt chronically disappointed and resentful. Then he began giving his consciousness to the divine love that exists independent of her responses. This was not resignation or suppression. It was genuine spiritual giving. Christopher acknowledged the presence of infinite love in consciousness and stopped demanding that his wife provide it. Remarkably, as he stopped taking from her, she began naturally giving more. The pressure dissolved and authentic connection emerged. Perhaps the most advanced application involves giving consciousness during apparent tragedy or loss. When life brings death, illness, or devastating change, every human instinct screams to take control, to fix, to resist. This taking creates additional suffering on top of the original pain. Goldsmith taught that even in darkness, especially in darkness, you can practice giving consciousness to the presence of God. This is not denial of human grief. It is the recognition of spiritual reality alongside the material appearance. You acknowledge the pain while giving your deepest awareness to the eternal life and perfect love that exists beyond all circumstances. A woman named Daniela faced her husband's terminal diagnosis. Her grief was profound and real, but she also practiced giving her consciousness to the truth of eternal life and divine presence. She did not deny her tears, but she also gave recognition to something beyond death. This practice did not prevent loss, but it transformed her experience of loss. Daniela found herself surrounded by unexpected peace even in heartbreak. She was able to be present with her husband's final months without being consumed by desperate taking, trying to extract impossibilities from the situation. The giving consciousness held her through what should have been unbearable. After months or years of practice, you begin to see the entire teaching differently. Give and it shall be given is not a command or a promise of reward. It is a description of how consciousness actually works. What you give your awareness to becomes your experience. This is not negotiable or optional. It is the fundamental law of spiritual life. You realize you have always been giving your consciousness to something. The question was never whether to give, but what to give your awareness to. Before understanding the teaching, you were unconsciously giving consciousness to appearances, to problems, to lack, to fear. Now you are consciously giving it to truth. The transformation is complete when giving consciousness becomes as natural as breathing. You no longer think about the technique. You simply live from the awareness of infinite presence within you. You radiate truth not as a practice, but as your natural state. This is what Jesus was teaching. A man named Michael reached this understanding after 3 years with Goldsmith's materials. He could no longer imagine living any other way. Giving his consciousness to divine reality had become his automatic response to every situation. Life had not become problem-free, but his relationship to life had fundamentally changed. At this stage of understanding, you recognize that you are not really giving anything at all in the human sense. You are simply acknowledging what already is. The infinite good exists in consciousness already. Perfect love, infinite wisdom, complete abundance. These are not things you create or earn or extract. They are what you recognize and allow. This recognition is what Jesus called giving. You give your attention, your awareness, your acknowledgement to spiritual reality, and in that very giving, you receive the experience of what you have recognized. The giving and receiving are not separated by time. They are one simultaneous movement of consciousness. Goldsmith spent his life pointing students toward this simplicity. Stop trying to get from the world. Stop trying to take from God. Simply give your consciousness to truth, and truth becomes your living experience. This is the secret hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years. This is the teaching that transforms everything. A woman named Claire finally understood after hearing this message repeatedly. She stopped all her complicated spiritual practices and techniques. She simply began giving her awareness to the presence of God throughout her day, acknowledging it while washing dishes, driving to work, sitting in meetings, just giving recognition to what already existed. Her life did not become suddenly perfect, but her experience of life became increasingly peaceful and abundant. Challenges still appeared, but she no longer struggled with them through taking mentality. She gave her consciousness to divine wisdom, and solutions appeared naturally. She gave her awareness to infinite supply, and resources flowed from unexpected sources. Claire understood what Jesus meant. The kingdom of heaven is within you. You are not traveling toward it or earning it or deserving it. You are giving your consciousness to its present reality, and that recognition transforms your entire experience of life. This is the true meaning of give, and it shall be given. The teaching works because consciousness is the only reality. The material world is the reflection of consciousness, not the source of it. When you understand this, you stop trying to change the reflection and start giving your attention to the source. You stop taking from appearances and start giving recognition to reality. This is why Goldsmith's teaching feels both ancient and revolutionary. It is what Jesus taught, what all mystics have taught, but it contradicts everything the material world tells you. The world says take, grab, extract, earn, deserve, fight for what you need. Jesus said, give consciousness to truth, and everything is added unto you. You stand now at a choice point that every spiritual seeker eventually faces. Will you continue living from taking consciousness, trying to extract your good from the world? Or will you begin the practice of giving consciousness to the infinite reality within you? This is not a small decision. It is the choice that determines your entire experience of life. Joel Goldsmith dedicated his life to making this teaching practical and clear. Give and it shall be given means give your awareness to spiritual truth and receive the experience of that truth. Stop trying to take from conditions and start radiating from consciousness. This is the secret that has the power to transform everything. The practice begins simply. Throughout today, notice when you are trying to take something mentally, taking security from circumstances, taking validation from people, taking peace from conditions. In those moments, pause and redirect. Give your consciousness instead to the spiritual reality that exists independent of appearances. Do not expect instant perfection in this practice. You are retraining consciousness from lifelong patterns, but each time you redirect from taking to giving, you strengthen your awareness of the infinite source within you. Over time, this becomes your natural state. You live from consciousness rather than from conditions, and everything changes. If your understanding of this teaching has expanded through Joel Goldsmith's wisdom, like this video to share it with others, subscribe for more transformational spiritual content, and comment, I give consciousness to confirm your commitment to this practice.
Today, we're going to uncover a truth that's been hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years. This isn't another sermon telling you to pray harder, believe stronger, or wait patiently for God to finally notice you. What you're about to discover might surprise you because it completely contradicts what you've heard from every pulpit, every Sunday school lesson, and every religious authority figure in your life. Have you ever wondered why your most desperate prayers seem to go unanswered while Jesus promised that you would do even greater works than he did? What if everything you've been taught about following Jesus has been carefully designed to keep you powerless, dependent, and forever seeking something that's already within your grasp right now? Here's the uncomfortable reality that most churches won't tell you. Jesus never intended to create a religion of worship around himself. He wasn't building a system where you'd spend your entire life begging an unreachable divine figure for scraps of mercy. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share will fundamentally shift how you understand everything Jesus actually taught versus what you've been told he taught. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Think about this for a moment. Every time you've prayed for a miracle, what position were you in? You were likely on your knees, feeling small, confessing your unworthiness, listing your failures, and desperately pleading for God to intervene in your circumstances. Has this ever happened to you? You pray with everything you have, follow every instruction perfectly, yet the breakthrough you need remains frustratingly out of reach, as if there's an invisible wall between you and the divine power you're seeking. What if I told you that this entire approach is the exact opposite of what Jesus was demonstrating? When he said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," he wasn't speaking metaphorically. When he promised, "You will do greater works than these," he wasn't exaggerating or speaking only to his disciples. He was revealing something revolutionary, that the Christ consciousness he embodied isn't exclusive, isn't distant, and isn't reserved for one perfect human being who lived 2 millennia ago. Jesus came to show you what's possible when a human being recognizes their true spiritual nature. He wasn't saying, worship me because I'm special and you're not. He was saying, follow me, learn what I've learned, access what I'm accessing, become what I'm demonstrating. But somewhere along the way, that message got twisted into a system that keeps you small, keeps you begging, and keeps you believing you're forever separated from the divine power that Jesus said lives within you. The difference between praying to Jesus and praying from Christ consciousness is the difference between remaining powerless and stepping into the same spiritual authority Jesus himself operated from. And what's about to unfold in this video will show you exactly how. Let's talk about what really happens inside your mind every single time you pray. You've been conditioned, trained from childhood to approach the divine from a position of absolute powerlessness. You start by rehearsing everything wrong with you. You catalog your mistakes, your failures, your unworthiness. You remind God, as if he needs reminding, of how broken and incomplete you are. Then, from that place of total lack, you beg for intervention. You plead for mercy. You promise to be better if only this one prayer gets answered. This is what I call beggar consciousness, and it's been embedded into your spiritual DNA through years of religious programming. Every prayer service, every altar call, every confession booth has reinforced this same message. You are separate from God, you are unworthy, you are powerless, and your only hope is that an external force might show you mercy if you grovel convincingly enough. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything about this journey of spiritual transformation. When Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," he wasn't delivering a beautiful metaphor for Sunday morning inspiration. He was revealing the fundamental mechanics of how spiritual reality actually operates. The kingdom isn't somewhere else. It isn't locked behind pearly gates waiting for you after death. It isn't controlled by religious authorities who hold the keys to your salvation. It's within you right now, in this very moment. Think about the profound impact of what this actually means. Christ consciousness, the state of awareness where miracles flow naturally, isn't something Jesus possessed exclusively because he was special and you're not. It's your birthright, your true nature, the essence of who you actually are beneath all the conditioning and religious programming that's been layered on top of it. Every time you pray from that beggar mindset, you're making a declaration to the universe about who you believe yourself to be. You're affirming that you're incomplete, that you're broken, that you're separate from divine supply. And here's where it gets really interesting. Consciousness, being the creative force that it is, immediately goes to work manifesting more evidence of exactly what you're declaring. You pray for abundance while declaring you're in lack. You pray for healing while affirming you're diseased and powerless. You pray for breakthrough while reinforcing the very walls that keep you trapped. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending problems don't exist. This is about understanding that the miracles you've been seeking outside yourself have always been within, waiting for you to recognize them. The transformation doesn't happen through more intense begging or more fervent petition. It happens through a complete shift in consciousness, a fundamental change in how you understand your relationship with the divine. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation, because what most people don't realize is that this beggar consciousness doesn't just affect your prayer life. It shapes your entire reality, every decision you make, every relationship you enter, every opportunity you see or miss. The consciousness you hold becomes the lens through which you experience everything. Write in the comments, "My consciousness is shifting," if this is beginning to reshape how you see your spiritual journey. So what does real prayer actually look like when you strip away all the religious theater and get down to the raw spiritual mechanics? It's not about asking at all. True prayer is recognition. It's aligning your awareness with what already exists in spiritual reality, not begging for something to come into existence. Let me make this practical for you, because this mindset shift is where the real transformation happens. When you're facing a health crisis, traditional religion teaches you to catalog every symptom to God, describe how much pain you're in, explain how desperate your situation is, and then beg for healing. But every word of that petition is actually reinforcing the problem. You're giving power to the disease. You're declaring it as real and threatening. You're affirming your powerlessness in the face of it. If you want to continue exploring these hidden truths that actually transform your life, hit that subscribe button. There's so much more here that will shift how you experience reality. The practice Jesus was actually demonstrating is radically different. Instead of begging God to fix what appears broken, you recognize that in the realm of pure consciousness, in spiritual reality, where everything originates, there is only wholeness and perfection. Disease doesn't exist there, lack doesn't exist there, limitation doesn't exist there. As you hold that recognition, as you rest in that awareness without fighting the appearance or fearing it, something extraordinary begins to happen. The body starts reflecting the consciousness you're holding, because physical form always follows consciousness. This is spiritual law, not religious hope. This is the hidden truth that religious institutions have worked tirelessly to keep buried. Because once you understand it, you don't need them anymore. You don't need intermediaries. You don't need special rituals or approved prayers or ordained authorities to grant you access to the divine. You have direct access right now, in this moment, through your own consciousness. And this brings us to something crucial about how Jesus positioned himself in relation to you. He never said, "Worship me and stay small." Those weren't his words or his intention. What he actually said was, "Follow me." Think about the massive difference between those two approaches. Worship keeps you at a distance, looking up at someone infinitely above you, hoping they'll notice you. Follow means come with me, learn what I'm learning, do what I'm doing, access what I'm accessing. Jesus was demonstrating a spiritual technology that every human being has access to. When he promised, "You will do greater works than these," he meant it literally, not as some impossible exaggeration. He was showing you the blueprint for how consciousness operates, how miracles manifest, how divine power flows through a human being who understands their true nature. This transformation from worshipper to practitioner is exactly what threatens institutional control. Because awakened people don't need permission to access the divine. The journey from powerless beggar to empowered spiritual being isn't about achieving some special status or becoming holier than others. It's about recognizing what's already true, what's always been true about who you actually are beneath all the religious programming. Every decision you make about whether to beg or recognize, whether to worship from a distance or follow into the same consciousness, shapes the reality you experience. What happens when you actually begin practicing this recognition instead of petition? When you start following Jesus' example instead of just worshipping his image? The impact on your daily life, your relationships, your health, your sense of purpose becomes undeniable. But there's something even deeper happening behind the scenes that most people never discover, and it has to do with how consciousness itself operates as the creative force in your life. Drop a comment saying, "I choose recognition," if this distinction between petition and recognition is clicking for you. Let me tell you something about the cross that will completely shift your understanding of what Jesus was actually demonstrating. Everything you've been taught about why Jesus died has been carefully constructed to keep you trapped in perpetual guilt and dependency. The traditional story goes like this. God was so furiously angry about humanity's sin that he required a blood sacrifice, and Jesus took the punishment you deserved so you could escape divine wrath. That narrative turns God into a vengeful tyrant and you into a condemned criminal who can only survive through someone else's suffering. But that's not what the cross demonstrates at all. Jesus wasn't appeasing an angry deity or paying off some cosmic debt. He was proving something far more profound about the nature of consciousness itself. He went through humanity's ultimate fear, physical death, and emerged on the other side to show you that your true identity is indestructible. You are not this temporary body that experiences pain, aging, and eventual dissolution. You are eternal consciousness having a temporary human experience. This revelation changes everything about how you understand suffering, challenges, and what you perceive as problems in your life. When difficulties arise, you're not being punished by a judgmental God testing your worthiness or paying you back for past mistakes. That entire framework keeps you imprisoned in fear and powerlessness. What's actually happening is something much more mechanical, much more predictable, and ultimately much more empowering. You're experiencing the external manifestation of whatever consciousness you've been holding. This is where the real transformation in your mindset begins, because once you grasp this spiritual law, you realize that changing your external circumstances isn't about manipulating the physical world or convincing God to intervene. It's about shifting the consciousness that's creating those circumstances in the first place. Think of it like this. Consciousness operates with the same consistency as gravity. When you hold an object and release it, you don't have to convince gravity to work or pray that the object falls. It falls because that's how physical law operates. In the same way, whatever you hold in consciousness must manifest in your external experience because that's how spiritual law operates. The external world has no choice but to reflect your internal state. This means that every persistent problem in your life, every pattern that keeps repeating, every limitation you keep encountering isn't evidence of God's disapproval or proof that you're cursed or unlucky. It's feedback showing you what consciousness you've been operating from. The journey toward transformation isn't about fixing what's outside. It's about recognizing and shifting what's inside, because the outside is simply the projection of the inside. Most people spend their entire lives trying to rearrange external circumstances while keeping the same internal consciousness that created those circumstances. They pray for financial breakthrough while maintaining poverty consciousness. They beg for healed relationships while holding resentment consciousness. They petition for opportunities while reinforcing victim consciousness. And then they wonder why nothing fundamentally changes, why the same patterns keep emerging in different forms. The hidden truth behind every spiritual teaching, the revelation that changes the entire game, is understanding that consciousness is the creative force. Not your actions, not your circumstances, not external conditions, but the consciousness you hold. This is what Jesus was demonstrating through every miracle, every teaching, every interaction. He was showing you how reality responds to consciousness, how form follows awareness, how your experience of life shifts when your internal state shifts. Right consciousness creates, if this principle is beginning to reshape how you understand the challenges you've been facing. Let me share a real story that demonstrates exactly how this shift from petition to recognition works when you're facing an impossible situation. There was a woman named Margaret who received a terminal diagnosis that doctors labeled incurable. She did everything traditional religion teaches. She attended healing services, had church elders lay hands on her, fasted for days, confessed every sin she could remember, and spent countless hours on her knees begging Jesus to intervene and fix what was happening in her body. Month after month, nothing changed. Her condition continued deteriorating. The despair was overwhelming because she'd followed every instruction perfectly, prayed with absolute sincerity, believed with everything she had. Yet the miracle remained frustratingly out of reach. She was exhausted from the journey, depleted from the constant battle, ready to give up entirely. Then something shifted in her understanding. She stopped cataloging her symptoms to God. She stopped describing how much pain she was in. She stopped begging for intervention. Instead, she began practicing something completely different. Every morning, she would sit in silence and recognize one simple truth. In spirit, there is no disease. She wasn't denying the physical symptoms or pretending they didn't exist. She was making a profound decision about what she would give ultimate authority to in her consciousness. The transformation didn't happen overnight like some charismatic miracle story. It unfolded gradually as her internal state shifted. First, the fear dissolved. Then the mental anguish began to lessen. Within 2 months, her doctors were completely baffled to find no trace of what they had confidently declared incurable. But here's what's crucial to understand about what actually happened. Margaret didn't get healed in the traditional sense of an external force fixing her broken body. She recognized that she'd never been separate from wholeness. The body simply reflected the change in consciousness. This is the practice of presence that changes everything, and it's the exact opposite of what you've been taught prayer should look like. Traditional prayer is you talking at God, presenting your wish list of needs and desires, explaining your problems in elaborate detail, and hoping someone out there is listening and cares enough to respond. You're having a one-sided conversation with a deity you imagine is somewhere far away, separate from you, occasionally intervening if you say the right words or demonstrate enough faith. If this video opened something in your awareness, hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who are ready for it. But real spiritual practice flips that entire approach. It's about becoming silent enough to listen. It's about recognizing that the presence you've been desperately seeking outside yourself is actually the essence of who you are. This isn't some abstract theological concept or poetic metaphor. This is the practical mechanics of how consciousness operates and how transformation actually happens. When you truly grasp that, Christ consciousness isn't something Jesus possessed exclusively 2,000 years ago, but is actually your consciousness right now. Everything about your spiritual journey shifts. You stop asking for things as if you're separate from the source of supply. You start receiving awareness of what already exists in the invisible realm of spirit. The miracles don't come from outside you. They emerge from within as you align with what's already true in consciousness. The hidden truth behind every manifestation, every healing, every breakthrough is this: physical form follows consciousness with absolute consistency. You can't force transformation by manipulating external circumstances. The impact happens when you shift what you're holding internally, and then watch as reality rearranges itself to match that internal shift. Type, "I'm listening now," if you're ready to practice presence instead of petition. Now here's where this gets really interesting, because there's a practice that completely inverts how you've been trained to handle problems. When something difficult appears in your life, whether it's a health crisis, a financial emergency, or a relationship falling apart, your immediate instinct is to fight it. You either physically battle against the circumstances, or you pray desperately for God to remove it. But here's what's happening behind the scenes that you probably don't realize. Every time you fight a problem, every time you focus all your energy on combating it, you're actually declaring that it has power. You're giving it authority over your consciousness. You're affirming it as real and threatening. This is the hidden truth that shifts everything about your approach to challenges. In spiritual reality, in the realm where consciousness is the only actual cause, the problem doesn't exist. It exists only in the realm of appearance, not in the realm of truth. You're not pretending difficulties aren't there or engaging in denial. You're making a profound decision about what you consider to be ultimate reality. The appearance is showing symptoms, circumstances, limitations. But you're recognizing that in pure consciousness, where everything originates, there is only wholeness, abundance, and infinite possibility. This practice requires you to hold two realities simultaneously. Yes, the appearance is here. Yes, the bank account shows zero. Yes, the body is displaying symptoms. Yes, the relationship is fractured. But you refuse to give those appearances the final word about your spiritual identity or the truth of your situation. As you rest in this recognition, as you stop empowering the problem by fighting it or fearing it, something extraordinary begins happening. The circumstances start shifting, not because you forced them through willpower, but because consciousness is reorganizing itself and physical form must follow. What makes this even more powerful is understanding where this transformation actually takes place. Every spiritual problem you've ever experienced, every challenge that's kept you trapped, every limitation that's felt insurmountable, exists only when your mind leaves the present moment. Think about this carefully. Right now, in this exact second, strip away all the mental commentary about what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow. Remove the stories about what your problem means, where it came from, how long it's lasted, or how bad it could get. In this pure present moment, where is the actual problem? You're alive right now. You're breathing. You're conscious and aware. Whatever crisis your mind wants to rehearse exists either in past regret or future anxiety, but it doesn't exist in this precise moment of now. Christ consciousness is only accessible in the present because the present is the only place that actually exists. Everything else is mental projection, stories you're telling yourself, fear-based scenarios you're imagining. The journey Jesus was demonstrating wasn't about escaping from life's challenges or pretending difficulties don't exist. It was about discovering where real life happens, which is always and only now. Pain might be present in this moment, physical discomfort might be here, but suffering, the mental anguish that torments you, requires thought about past or future. It requires your mind to leave the now and create elaborate narratives about what everything means. Drop "I choose now" in the comments if this revelation about presence is shifting how you relate to your challenges. Understanding presence leads us to something even more foundational, something that's at the root of every struggle you've ever faced. Every problem, every challenge, every miracle you're desperately seeking stems from one single belief that's been operating in the background of your consciousness your entire life. It's the belief in separation. You believe you're separate from God, separate from the supply you need, separate from the healing you want, separate from other people who seem to have what you lack. This separation consciousness is what Jesus was actually referring to when he talked about sin. Not in the moral sense of wrongdoing that deserves punishment, but in the original meaning of the word, which is missing the mark of truth. The truth is, there's only one divine consciousness appearing as many temporary forms. The person who betrayed you, the situation that hurt you, the circumstances that disappointed you, they're all divine. Consciousness temporarily forgetting itself, exactly as you sometimes forget your true nature. This revelation doesn't excuse harmful behavior or mean you accept abuse. What it does is remove the emotional charge that keeps you imprisoned by past experiences and current circumstances. When you recognize that everything you've been seeking exists right now in consciousness and you've never actually been separate from it, the entire journey transforms. You're not pursuing abundance, health, or peace as external goals somewhere out there that you have to earn or achieve. You're recognizing they exist in your consciousness this very moment, and your only work is allowing that recognition to become your lived experience. This is where the concept of grace becomes radically different from what religion has taught you. Grace isn't God showing mercy toward undeserving sinners who've groveled convincingly enough. Grace is the automatic flow of divine good that operates the moment you stop trying to manipulate, control, and force outcomes through sheer human effort. Every frantic attempt to make something happen, every sleepless night spent strategizing, every anxious moment trying to figure out how to fix your situation comes from that deep belief in separation. The belief that if you don't hustle and scheme and force things into place, nothing will work out. Living by grace means recognizing that Source is already supplying everything before you even ask. This sounds passive to the achievement-oriented mindset that's been programmed into you, but it's actually the most active spiritual practice possible, because it requires constant vigilance against your ego's compulsive need to take control. Your ego believes that you must do something, must take charge, must ensure survival through constant action and manipulation. But spiritual consciousness is always doing everything. Your work is getting out of the way and allowing grace to operate without your interference. This requires a level of trust that feels impossible until you actually experience it working in your life. It means making decisions from a completely different foundation. Instead of asking, "What can I do to make this happen?" you're asking, "What is consciousness already doing? And how can I align with it?" The impact of this shift is profound because you're no longer exhausting yourself trying to force outcomes. You're resting in the recognition that divine good flows naturally when you stop blocking it with fear-based control. Write, "I trust the flow," if you're ready to release control and allow grace to operate in your life. Now here's something crucial that nobody warns you about. And it's the reason so many people abandon this entire practice right when it's about to break through. When you first start practicing this shift in consciousness, when you move from petition to recognition, from separation to oneness, from control to grace, your circumstances might actually get worse before they improve. This isn't failure. This isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong or that the practice doesn't work. It's the transition revealing everything false in your life so truth can replace it. Think about what happens when you stop maintaining illusions through force and control. Everything not built on spiritual truth begins to dismantle. The relationships held together by manipulation start falling apart. The financial structures built on anxiety and fear-based striving begin to collapse. The health patterns maintained by stress and resistance surface more visibly. Most people hit this point and immediately panic. They abandon the practice and return to begging God to fix the chaos, not understanding that consciousness is actually cleaning house. This transition period tests your commitment to truth over comfort, to spiritual reality over familiar appearances. It's asking whether you're willing to let everything false crumble so something real can emerge. The journey through this phase requires trust that's almost impossible to maintain without understanding what's actually happening behind the scenes. You're not being punished. You're not doing it wrong. You're experiencing the natural consequence of consciousness, shifting from false foundations to true foundations. And the old structures can't remain standing when the internal support system changes. Some people practice faithfully for months and watch their entire life seem to disintegrate. Marriages hit crisis point. Businesses start failing. Health declines. Every area that was held together by the old consciousness begins revealing its instability. The temptation to quit, to return to what's familiar even if it wasn't working, becomes overwhelming. But this is precisely where the real transformation begins to take root. Everything that needs to fall apart is being given permission to fall apart so you can rebuild from truth instead of continuing to build on false foundations. As you persist through this transition, as you refuse to abandon recognition even when appearances suggest total collapse, you begin moving towards something profound. You start becoming transparent to divine consciousness. This isn't about achieving some special spiritual status or becoming holier than other people. It's about becoming so established in Christ consciousness, so clear of personal agenda and ego-driven motivation, that divine consciousness can operate through you without obstruction. This is the same state Jesus demonstrated, and it's not reserved for ancient prophets or specially chosen people. It's available to you through persistent recognition of what's already true. You don't achieve transparency through effort or technique. You achieve it by continuously releasing everything false until only truth remains. And that process happens naturally as you practice presence consistently, day after day, choosing recognition over petition, choosing truth over comfortable illusions, choosing to trust the process even when everything seems to be falling apart. Type, "I'm staying faithful," if you're committing to this journey, even through the transition period. If you're still here with me, you've just taken a journey that most people will never experience because they're too comfortable staying inside the familiar cage of traditional religious thinking. What we've explored today isn't just information that sits in your mind and fades away by tomorrow. This is transformation waiting to happen in your life the moment you begin practicing what you now understand. This channel exists to bring you these hidden truths that have been buried under centuries of institutional control, to give you practical spiritual insights that actually work when you apply them. If this resonates with you, if you want to continue exploring the revelations that change everything about how you experience reality, go ahead and subscribe. There's so much more to uncover together, and I'm committed to bringing you content that shifts consciousness, not just fills time. Drop a comment right now saying, "This message was meant for me," so I know you made it all the way through. I read every single comment, and there's something powerful about declaring your commitment to this path publicly. It anchors the decision in your consciousness and lets me know these teachings are landing where they need to land. And if this video opened doors in your awareness that have been locked for years, hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who are ready for it, people who are tired of begging and ready to start recognizing, individuals who sense there's something deeper than what religion has been teaching them. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into dissolving the blocks that keep you from experiencing what Jesus actually demonstrated. It picks up right where we're leaving off and shows you the practical steps for living from Christ. Consciousness instead of just understanding it intellectually. Click and continue with me over there, because what you've learned today is just the beginning of understanding how spiritual reality actually operates in your life.
For centuries, seekers have misunderstood one of the most powerful spiritual secrets ever spoken. When the Master said you need faith like a mustard seed to move mountains, nearly everyone got it backwards. They thought it meant having a tiny bit of faith that grows bigger. That interpretation has kept millions trapped in struggle. The mustard seed teaching is not about quantity of faith at all. It is about the quality and nature of that faith. A mustard seed does not try to become a tree. It does not affirm or visualize or beg to grow. It simply contains within itself the complete intelligence and power to fulfill its destiny without effort or doubt. This is the consciousness secret Joel Goldsmith spent his life teaching. Your faith must be like that seed, not in size, but in naturalness. It is not about believing harder or longer. It is about resting in the truth that spiritual law operates as automatically as that seed becomes a tree, without your mental gymnastics. When you finally understand this distinction, everything changes. You stop trying to manufacture faith through repetition and start recognizing the faith that already exists within your consciousness, waiting to unfold as naturally as breath. The world teaches you to pump yourself up with affirmations, to convince yourself through repetition that what you want is already yours. This creates exhausting mental effort. You are trying to make something happen through the force of your belief. And when results do not come quickly, you assume your faith was too weak or too small. But Joel Goldsmith revealed a startling truth. Faith is not something you create or build. It is something you uncover. It already exists in your consciousness as surely as the tree exists in the seed. Your work is not to generate faith, but to remove the mental interference blocking its natural expression and operation. Think about how a seed grows in darkness underground. It does not see the sun, yet it moves toward it with absolute certainty. This is not blind faith or wishful thinking. It is recognition of spiritual law already operating. The seed does not doubt because it is one with the intelligence that created it, completely unified. Your consciousness contains that same divine intelligence. When you stop trying to create faith and start recognizing the spiritual law already present within you, mountains begin to move. Not through your effort, but through the automatic operation of consciousness aligned with truth and divine principle. Here is where most spiritual teaching goes wrong. They tell you to have faith in your faith, to believe that your belief will produce results. This creates a vicious circle of mental strain. You are believing in your ability to believe strongly enough, which is exhausting and ultimately ineffective in transformation. Joel Goldsmith taught something radically different. Your faith must not be in your faith at all. Your faith must be in the spiritual principle itself, in the invisible law that operates regardless of your awareness of it. Gravity works whether you believe in it or not. Spiritual law operates with the same impersonal perfection. The mustard seed does not have faith in its own faith. It has faith in the law of growth, in the intelligence that designed it, in the soil and sun and rain that are already provided. It rests in the certainty that everything needed for its fulfillment already exists, not as future possibility but as present reality. When you shift from faith in your mental state to faith in spiritual law, you stop exhausting yourself. You stop checking constantly to see if you believe enough. You simply rest in the recognition that the law is operating, and your only job is to not interfere with mental resistance. This revelation transforms everything about how you approach healing, manifestation, and spiritual growth. You are no longer trying to convince God or the universe through the intensity of your belief. You are recognizing that divine intelligence is already acting, already knowing, already providing everything necessary for your wholeness. The mustard seed never worries if it has enough faith. It contains complete trust in the process without questioning or analyzing. This is the quality of faith you must cultivate, not through effort but through understanding. When you see that spiritual law operates as perfectly as mathematical law, your consciousness shifts. This is not passive waiting or lazy hoping. It is active recognition and conscious resting in truth. You are alert to the presence of divine intelligence operating in your life, but you are not manipulating or forcing. You are allowing consciousness to unfold its inherent perfection naturally. In the next few minutes, we will explore exactly how to apply this revolutionary understanding. You will learn to identify when you are trying to create faith versus recognizing it. You will discover how to remove mental interference, and you will experience the transformation that comes from mustard seed consciousness in operation. Maria struggled with chronic pain for 8 years. She tried every technique, repeated affirmations thousands of times, visualized perfect health daily. She was exhausted from trying to believe hard enough. Then she discovered Joel Goldsmith's mustard seed teaching and everything shifted, though not instantly. The first week, Maria simply stopped trying to create faith. She stopped her endless affirmations and visualizations. Instead, she began each morning recognizing that spiritual law knows nothing of pain or limitation. She was not trying to convince herself of this. She was simply acknowledging truth regardless of her physical experience. For 3 weeks, nothing seemed to change. But Maria noticed something different inside. The desperate mental effort was gone. She was not anxiously checking her pain levels or rating her faith. She was simply resting in the recognition that divine intelligence operates perfectly, whether she feels it immediately or not. In the 4th week, she woke one morning and realized the pain had decreased by half. She did not celebrate or fear losing progress. She simply continued resting in spiritual law. Over 3 months, the pain dissolved completely, not through her mental gymnastics, but through non-interference with consciousness already operating toward wholeness. David faced financial collapse after his business failed. Everyone told him to affirm abundance, to visualize money flowing, to have faith he would be rescued. He tried desperately, but his faith felt hollow because circumstances screamed the opposite. The harder he tried to believe, the more exhausted he became mentally. When David learned the true mustard seed principle, he made a radical shift. He stopped trying to manufacture feelings of abundance or convince himself money was coming. Instead, he began recognizing that spiritual intelligence governs supply as perfectly as it governs the seasons, and this recognition required no emotional proof. The practice felt strange at first. When bills arrived, instead of panicking or forcing positive thoughts, David would simply acknowledge that divine law knows nothing of lack or insufficiency. He was not denying the bills existed. He was refusing to accept them as the final truth of his being. Over 6 months, unexpected opportunities appeared, not through magic, but through David's consciousness becoming receptive rather than desperate. A former colleague offered partnership in a new venture. Clients from years past suddenly returned. The shift happened because David stopped interfering with spiritual intelligence operating through his consciousness naturally. Jennifer wanted to heal her damaged relationship with her daughter. They had not spoken in 2 years after bitter conflicts. She prayed constantly, visualized reunion, tried to have faith they would reconcile. But nothing changed because her faith was really fear disguised as hope, forcing outcomes. Joel Goldsmith's teaching showed Jennifer her mistake. She was trying to use faith as a tool to manipulate circumstances and force healing. Real mustard seed faith meant recognizing that love is the nature of spiritual consciousness, operating whether the outer picture shows it or not, beyond her control. Jennifer stopped her mental campaigns to create reconciliation. Instead, she began each day recognizing that divine love governs all relationships, that spiritual law knows only wholeness and unity. She sent no manipulative texts or forced contact. She simply rested in truth, operating beyond her limited vision of how healing should appear. 8 months later, her daughter called unexpectedly. The conversation was tentative but genuine. Over a year, they slowly rebuilt trust. Jennifer understood this happened not because her faith produced results, but because her non-interference allowed consciousness to operate naturally. The healing was already happening invisibly before any outer change appeared. These stories reveal the pattern. Transformation happens not through intensity of belief, but through recognition of spiritual law already operating. Maria, David, and Jennifer each stopped exhausting themselves, trying to create enough faith. They shifted to resting in the automatic operation of divine intelligence, like the seed rests in growth law. This is not instant magic or overnight miracles. Notice the time frames: weeks, months, even a year. True spiritual consciousness unfolds according to its own intelligence, not your anxious timeline. Your job is not to speed it up through mental effort, but to stop slowing it down through interference and resistance. The mustard seed does not grow faster when you dig it up daily to check progress. Your healing, supply, and relationships do not accelerate when you constantly measure your faith level or doubt the process. You must learn the art of recognition without manipulation, of trust without control, of faith as resting rather than striving. If these transformation stories inspire you to understand faith differently, like this video to help others discover this revolutionary teaching, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment which story resonated most deeply with your own spiritual journey today. Beyond the basic mustard seed principle, Joel Goldsmith taught specific techniques to help you shift from manufactured faith to recognize truth. The first technique is what he called spiritual awareness rather than mental treatment. You stop trying to change conditions and start recognizing what is already spiritually true, regardless of appearances or feelings. When you face a challenge, your habit is to immediately begin mental work to fix it. You pray for change, affirm the opposite, visualize solutions. This entire approach assumes something is wrong that your mind must correct. But mustard seed consciousness recognizes that spiritual reality is already perfect, complete, and operating according to divine law. Here is the practice. When confronting any problem, pause before rushing into mental treatment. Ask yourself not what you need to believe or visualize, but what is already spiritually true about this situation. If it is illness, the spiritual truth is that divine life is the only life, incapable of disease or deterioration. You are not trying to make this true through faith. You are recognizing it is already true. operating invisibly beneath the visible condition. Your awareness of this truth does not cause healing. Your awareness allows healing that is already happening in consciousness to manifest outwardly, without your mental interference blocking the natural flow. The second complementary technique is what Joel called the practice of not outlining. This is crucial because most people sabotage their own spiritual unfoldment by demanding specific outcomes. You pray for healing but specify exactly how and when it should appear. You ask for supply but insist it come through particular channels. The mustard seed does not tell the universe it wants to be exactly 4 feet tall by next Tuesday. It contains the intelligence to fulfill its nature, and it trusts the process completely. When you outline specific results, you are operating from limited human perception, blocking infinite intelligence from working in ways beyond your imagination. Practice releasing all pictures of how your good should appear. If you need healing, recognize spiritual wholeness without demanding the symptoms disappear by Friday. If you need supply, acknowledge divine abundance without insisting your employer give you a raise. Let spiritual law operate according to its own perfect intelligence. This feels risky to the human mind. You fear that without specific demands, nothing will happen. But the opposite is true. When you stop limiting infinite intelligence with your tiny mental pictures, consciousness is free to manifest your good in ways far exceeding anything you could have outlined or forced. The third technique is daily recognition practice that Joel called treatment in the absolute. You set aside time not to pray for things or people, but simply to recognize spiritual truth for its own sake. This builds consciousness that operates automatically, like breathing, without constant effort or checking results. Spend 10 minutes each morning recognizing truth regardless of circumstances. Divine intelligence is the only power. Spiritual law governs all. Life is eternal and whole. You are not trying to make these statements produce results. You are training consciousness to rest naturally in truth the way a seed rests in soil. This practice seems to have no immediate practical application. You are not focusing on your specific problems or needs, but this is exactly why it works. You are building a consciousness of truth that operates beneath all circumstances, creating a foundation from which solutions emerge naturally rather than through desperate mental effort. Over weeks and months, you notice something profound. Problems that would have triggered panic and frantic prayers now barely disturb you. Not because you have become passive, but because your consciousness rests in something deeper than circumstances. You are living from mustard seed faith that operates automatically, requiring less and less conscious effort. The fourth technique Joel taught is instantaneous recognition in the midst of crisis. When fear or doubt strikes suddenly, you do not need a 30-minute meditation to remember truth. You have trained consciousness to snap immediately into recognition of spiritual law operating, regardless of the alarming appearance demanding your attention. Someone calls with devastating news. Your first response is not panic or prayer for intervention. It is instant recognition. Divine intelligence is operating perfectly right now. This does not deny the problem exists in appearance. It refuses to accept appearance as the final truth overriding spiritual law. This becomes second nature with practice. Like a musician who no longer thinks about finger placement, you begin recognizing spiritual truth automatically in every situation. Your consciousness shifts from reactive fear to responsive trust. Not trust in outcomes matching your desires, but trust in spiritual law operating according to divine intelligence. These four techniques work together. Daily recognition builds consciousness. Non-outlining releases control. Spiritual awareness shifts focus from fixing to recognizing. Instant recognition handles crises. Combined with the basic mustard seed principle, they create a completely transformed approach to life where faith is no longer something you manufacture but something you rest in naturally. The most common obstacle people encounter is the gap between recognition and manifestation. You recognize spiritual truth faithfully for days or weeks, but circumstances remain unchanged or even worsen. Your mind screams that the teaching is not working, that you are doing something wrong, that perhaps you lack sufficient faith after all. Joel Goldsmith addressed this challenge directly. The gap between spiritual recognition and visible manifestation is not evidence of failure. It is the testing ground where shallow mental agreement becomes deep consciousness. The seed does not doubt during the invisible growing period underground. Your faith must maintain recognition even when outer evidence contradicts. This is not blind stubbornness or denial of reality. It is understanding that spiritual cause precedes material effect, sometimes by weeks or months. When you plant a seed, you do not dig it up after 3 days to check if it is working. You trust the invisible process. Your spiritual recognition is planting seeds in consciousness. The temptation is to abandon the practice when quick results do not appear. But this is precisely when your faith is shifting from mental technique to consciousness. If you return to old patterns of desperate prayer and anxious affirmation, you interrupt the natural unfoldment. Stay with recognition regardless of timing. Trust the invisible process. Another challenge is the voice of reason that calls spiritual recognition foolish or irresponsible. When facing serious illness, financial crisis, or relationship breakdown, practical people tell you to stop all this mystical nonsense and take real action. Your own mind joins the chorus, insisting that recognition without action is lazy escapism. Joel taught that spiritual recognition and practical action are not opposites. You act from consciousness rather than panic. When you recognize spiritual law operating, you become receptive to divine intelligence guiding appropriate action. But the action flows from trust rather than desperation, from recognition rather than fear, from consciousness rather than mental manipulation. The difference is profound. Fear-based action is frantic, controlling, exhausting. Consciousness-based action is peaceful, effective, sustainable. You are not forcing outcomes through willpower. You are allowing intelligence to guide you, taking steps that feel right, without anxiety about results matching your limited vision of success. If someone criticizes your approach as passive or impractical, you need not defend or explain. Simply continue recognizing spiritual truth while taking whatever actions consciousness guides. Over time, results will speak louder than arguments. Your life becomes evidence that faith as recognition rather than manipulation actually works in practical reality. The third major obstacle is doubt that arises from past failures. You have tried spiritual techniques before. You had faith, you prayed, you visualized, and nothing happened. Now when you hear about mustard seed faith, your mind whispers that this will fail too. Past disappointment creates resistance to present recognition. Joel would say your past attempts failed not because spiritual law does not work, but because you were operating from manufactured faith rather than recognized truth. You were trying to use faith as a tool to get what you wanted, rather than resting in spiritual principle operating regardless of personal desire or outcome. This time is different not because you are trying harder, but because you understand differently. You are not attempting to create enough faith to move mountains. You are recognizing that spiritual law moves mountains automatically when consciousness stops interfering. The seed never failed. Your digging it up constantly to check progress prevented natural growth. Release your past spiritual disappointments. They were learning experiences showing you what does not work. Now you are approaching faith in an entirely new way. Not as manufactured belief, but as recognized law. Let go of fear that this will fail like previous attempts. This is not another technique. This is consciousness transformation. The final major obstacle is the addiction to seeing and measuring progress. You want evidence that your recognition is working. You check your bank account daily when practicing supply consciousness. You monitor symptoms hourly when recognizing health. This constant measuring is itself the interference blocking natural unfoldment. The mustard seed grows in darkness without measurement. It does not pause growth to verify progress every few hours. When you constantly check whether your recognition is producing results, you are operating from doubt disguised as vigilance. Real faith as recognition requires releasing all need for immediate visible confirmation. Practice blind recognition. Acknowledge spiritual truth operating whether you see evidence or not. When the urge to check progress arises, recognize it as interference and return to simple truth. Divine intelligence is operating perfectly right now. Spiritual law knows only wholeness. Your good is unfolding according to wisdom beyond human sight. If these obstacle-breaking techniques speak to your heart and show you why faith has not worked before, like to support this transformative content, subscribe for advanced Joel Goldsmith teachings, and comment which obstacle you are ready to release right now. Advanced integration means applying mustard seed consciousness to every area of life simultaneously. not just your current crisis. Joel Goldsmith lived this teaching, not as a technique for emergencies, but as his permanent state of being. He woke each morning resting in spiritual truth before circumstances demanded it. Begin integrating recognition into mundane moments. Waiting in traffic, recognize divine order operating. Preparing meals, acknowledge infinite supply. Interacting with difficult people, see spiritual identity beyond personality. These micro-recognitions build consciousness that operates automatically, so when crisis comes, you do not have to manufacture faith suddenly. This is not adding more spiritual busywork to your day. It is shifting the foundation from which you live. Instead of moving through life in human consciousness and switching to spiritual consciousness only when problems arise, you maintain spiritual recognition as your baseline, and human concerns become the temporary interruption. The challenge here is consistency without strain. You are not trying to maintain perfect awareness every second. That creates exhausting hypervigilance. You are simply returning to recognition naturally throughout the day, the way you return to breathing without thinking about it. This builds consciousness that requires less and less conscious effort over time. Another advanced application is recognizing spiritual truth for others without telling them or trying to fix them. When someone shares a problem, your habit is to offer advice, sympathy, or try to help practically. Joel taught something deeper. Silently recognize spiritual truth about that person, knowing that consciousness is one and your recognition affects the whole. Someone tells you about their illness. Instead of sympathizing with the disease or advising treatment, you silently recognize their spiritual wholeness. You do not share this recognition or try to convince them. You simply hold truth in consciousness, knowing that spiritual law operates for them whether they are aware of it or not. This practice feels strange because you appear to do nothing visible. But consciousness is cause, and consciousness is shared. Your recognition of spiritual truth about another person is not wishful thinking or metaphysical manipulation. It is acknowledging what is already true, allowing that truth to operate without the interference of mutual fear and sympathy. Do not tell people you are recognizing truth for them. This often creates resistance or dependence. Simply maintain spiritual awareness silently while interacting normally. Offer practical help when appropriate, but from consciousness of their wholeness rather than belief in their limitation. This combination of practical compassion and spiritual recognition serves others most effectively. Advanced practice also means recognizing spiritual truth in the face of seeming tragedy or permanent limitation. This is where mustard seed faith proves its depth. Anyone can recognize truth when circumstances are mildly challenging. Can you recognize spiritual law operating when the diagnosis is terminal, or the loss seems final, or the limitation appears permanent? Joel faced this repeatedly in his healing practice. People came after doctors declared their cases hopeless. He did not try to convince himself or them that everything would be fine. He simply recognized that spiritual life knows nothing of terminal or hopeless, that divine intelligence is operating regardless of medical pronouncement. This does not mean you deny practical reality or stop appropriate treatment. It means you refuse to accept material appearance as the final truth overriding spiritual law. You recognize both the appearance and the deeper truth simultaneously, holding spiritual reality as the ultimate substance beneath visible conditions. Not everyone who received Joel's recognition experienced physical healing, but everyone experienced consciousness shift, peace that transcends circumstances, spiritual awakening regardless of body changes. This is true healing, consciousness recognizing its spiritual nature even when material conditions remain challenging. Faith as recognition succeeds even when faith as outcome demanding appears to fail. The ultimate advanced application is living from permanent spiritual identity rather than temporary human personality. You begin recognizing yourself as consciousness in which all experience appears, rather than a person having consciousness. This is the deepest meaning of mustard seed faith. Your very nature is spiritual law operating. This sounds abstract, but it transforms everything. When you identify as consciousness rather than body or person, challenges lose their power to define you. You face illness, lack, or conflict not as threats to your being, but as temporary appearances within consciousness that you are. The seed is one with the intelligence that created it, completely unified. Practice this throughout the day. Instead of thinking I am sick or I am broke or I am afraid, recognize I am the consciousness in which sickness, lack, and fear appear temporarily. You are not denying the experience. You are shifting identity from the experience to the consciousness witnessing it, which remains whole regardless. This is Joel Goldsmith's ultimate secret. Faith like a mustard seed means recognizing your spiritual identity as surely as the seed recognizes its nature. You stop trying to have enough faith and start being the consciousness in which all faith and doubt, all success and failure, all life and death appear. From this recognition, mountains move naturally. Now we arrive at total transformation, seeing your entire life through the lens of mustard seed consciousness. You no longer divide experience into spiritual moments and ordinary moments. Everything becomes opportunity to recognize spiritual law operating, from waking to sleeping, from challenge to triumph, from crisis to peace. Your morning coffee is not just caffeine intake. It is recognition of divine substance sustaining all life. Your work is not just earning money. It is consciousness expressing infinite creativity and supply. Your relationships are not just human interactions. They are spiritual identities recognizing themselves in each other, beyond personality and conflict. This does not make you disconnected or impractical. You become more effective, not less. When you stop exhausting yourself trying to manufacture faith for everything, energy flows into actions guided by consciousness rather than panic. You accomplish more with less effort because you are not fighting reality but recognizing deeper reality operating. People may notice something different about you. Not that you are suddenly perfect or problem-free, but you carry a quality of unshakable peace beneath circumstances. You face challenges without the desperate edge that characterizes most human struggle. You have discovered what Joel called conscious union with God, living as the mustard seed lives, one with the intelligence expressing through it. The transformation extends beyond your personal life into how you see the entire world. When you watch the news, you no longer sink into despair about humanity's problems. You recognize spiritual law operating beneath all appearances, working toward harmony even through chaos. This is not naive optimism. It is faith as spiritual recognition rather than hope for preferred outcomes. You begin seeing every person as consciousness expressing in unique form, even those whose actions you find difficult or harmful. You do not condone wrong behavior, but you refuse to see anyone as ultimately separated from spiritual intelligence. Your recognition of their spiritual identity does not depend on their recognition of it. This creates a life of profound peace without passivity. You take action when consciousness guides. You speak truth when appropriate. You set boundaries when necessary. But underneath all activity, you rest in the recognition that spiritual law is operating perfectly, that divine intelligence is unfolding according to wisdom you cannot fully see. Your transformation becomes silent testimony to others. You do not preach or explain unless asked. You simply live from mustard seed consciousness, and others notice the difference. Some ask about your peace. Others criticize your strange faith. All responses are fine. You are not trying to convert anyone. You are simply being the seed that grows naturally. As transformation deepens, you realize the teaching was never about moving physical mountains. The mountains that move are the mountains of consciousness, fear, doubt, limitation, separation, unworthiness. These inner mountains that have blocked your experience of wholeness dissolve in the presence of spiritual recognition operating naturally. You look back at where you began, exhausted from trying to create enough faith to change circumstances. Now you rest in recognition that spiritual law operates regardless of your awareness or effort. This is not laziness. It is the hardest and most subtle work, getting yourself and your mental manipulation out of the way. The paradox is complete. You have more faith now not because you tried harder to believe, but because you stopped trying altogether. You discovered that faith like a mustard seed means being what you are spiritually, rather than trying to have what you lack humanly. The seed does not try to be a tree. It simply is what it is, naturally. Joel Goldsmith spent decades teaching this single principle in countless variations. Now you understand why he never tired of pointing to this truth. It is not just another spiritual technique. It is the revelation that consciousness itself is the substance of all form, and recognizing this dissolves the entire struggle of human existence. You are not the same person who began this teaching. You cannot be. You have discovered that everything you sought through faith was already present in consciousness, waiting for recognition rather than creation. The healing, supply, peace, love, and wholeness you pursued were never absent, only unrecognized. This is the final secret Joel wanted you to know. You are the mustard seed, not your personality, not your body, not your circumstances. The consciousness reading these words right now is spiritual intelligence itself, containing everything needed for its complete expression. Your only work is removing the interference of manufactured faith and resting in recognition. Go forward living from this consciousness. When challenges arise, remember you are not a person trying to have enough faith to move mountains. You are consciousness itself, and mountains move naturally when you stop interfering with mental gymnastics. Recognize, rest, and watch spiritual law operate according to its own perfect intelligence. If your understanding of faith has been completely transformed by these Joel Goldsmith revelations, like this video to help others discover this life-changing truth. Subscribe for more teachings that shift consciousness, and comment, "I am the mustard seed," to claim your spiritual identity.